Hi, everybody. Welcome to the InPower Women and InPower Coaching Tuesday coffee break. This is the time we pull up a cup of something and chat a little bit about topics of interest to us in the areas of workplace survival and thrival, emotional intelligence at work, women's leadership at work, and just topics about how do we bring our professional selves authentically into the world. And today we have we're getting Rosie Feenstra from Silkarmour back. She's been here before, and we're going to be talking about the very important topic of the imposter syndrome, primarily for women, but men experience it too. So we'll be looking at that and how sometimes it's easy to kind of feel like, you know, you're putting up a facade and nobody really realizes what you're not capable of. And there's a lot of different versions of the imposter syndrome, but that tends to summarize it. So in just a minute here, Mary Brody, InPower Women marketing guru, will introduce Rosie. I just want to let you know we do have an open seat today on the video. So if you'd like to join us in the conversation, make sure you're logged into Twitter and on the Blab platform and ask to come in. And Mary will bring you in when we open it up for conversation. We also have the chat box here, and feel free to submit questions or thoughts or ideas that way as well. So Mary, why don't you introduce Rosie?
Sure. Rosie is the assistant editor at Silkarmour. After interning in the editorial and fashion departments at Women's Wear Daily, Tatler, The Times, Harper's Bazaar, Rosie joined the Silkarmour team as an editorial intern in October 2015 before transitioning to her assistant editor role this year. She's managing and producing Silkarmour's editorial content. Drawing on her experience at startups and national publications, Rosie's editorial role strikes the perfect balance between her interests in luxury fashion and its sociological ties, alongside supporting the all-important cause of female empowerment. Rosie graduated from London College of Fashion with a master's in fashion journalism after obtaining her BA in philosophy from the University of Nottingham. Her writing has been featured extensively in international fashion biannual Idol, LCF publication Pigeons and Peacocks, the art publication New, Kit Magazine, and Impact Magazine, in which she served as a features editor. She has also co-founded two publications, Women Lifestyle No Filter and Men's Travel Journal Hunt. And welcome, Rosie.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again.
Welcome back, Rosie. I forgot to mention, by the way, I'm Dana Theus with InPower Coaching. And when I started writing about women in leadership years ago now, the imposter syndrome was one of the first things I encountered in the research. I mean, this is something that we've known about now for, 40 years or something, 30 years, in terms of like, knowing it's not just us, because I think most of us feel like, oh, it's just me, nobody else feels this way. So I'm curious about how you came to the imposter syndrome, where you found it, why you wanted to, focus on it. And I should also say you posted a wonderful blog on InPowerWomen.com yesterday on this topic. So I know it's fresh in your mind, but tell us about why this is important to you.
Well, it came to light initially actually through research. I am a big Sheryl Sandberg fan, and so I like to keep up with her in the news and how it's the latest thing she's been doing. She recently published a great article for Stylist magazine actually on securing women in board roles. And I was really shocked to find out she actually wrote extensively about imposter syndrome, as she herself identified as a sufferer. It all starts down when she was graduating at Harvard, and back then the graduation classes were divided into two genders. Boys would graduate separately from girls. And the girls were actually given a speech on feeling like a fraud. And apparently there and then, immediately, she recognized and realized and saw that in herself, in that she had, although she was graduating summa cum laude, she felt like she had tricked everybody all the way through her degree at Harvard University, of all places, in that she'd been faking it. And immediately that struck, a chord with me in thinking, how can one of the most powerful, intelligent, and capable women possibly feel fraudulent? And if someone at that level and, has achieved so much for so many women and sets an example for so many women, doesn't feel like she's worthy of the role she performs, then absolutely it probably affects other people. And it literally that was the catalyst. I had to dive in more, and I had to find out how many women are affected by it. Because if it starts from the top, it's inevitably going to trickle down. And that's a worrying thought.
That's an excellent point. And in fact, I know that Ginny Rometty, who's a CEO of IBM has admitted to the same thing, sort of feeling like a fraud sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes. And one thing that's interesting to me about these very senior women admitting it is they, like you said, they open the door for us to say, oh, it's not just me. But look, if they can feel like a fraud, like sometimes, like they don't really deserve the accolades they're getting, or people don't really realize that they're not as good as everybody says they are, whatever that fraud looks like for them, but they do their jobs. They go out there, they are a public presence, they run major companies. Hey, look, you can have that feeling sometimes and actually not be a fraud. Absolutely.
That also, I think, strikes a chord with women maybe when you're younger. If you cast your mind back to the dynamics in high school or university, when you're working really hard and there may be an element of self-comparison between yourself and your grades and other people, you immediately feel better when the best girl in the class or somebody who you admire in your class sticks their hands up or admits to you they're struggling and they're feeling behind. That association of strength in numbers, that you're not alone, that is the first step to overcoming it. And absolutely having, say, my role models, absolutely in Sheryl Sandberg and Ginny Rometty saying they feel they suffer from it. It's the first step to overcoming it and realizing you are all only human and you all have the same problems.
Well, and you just said something I think is really important. Is this related to, I'll call it the perfectionism disease?
Absolutely. Call it that. It's a great phrase.
I just made that up.
No, I think so. I mean, again, I'm quite young and I'm early on in my career, but perfection has always been something that I held myself accountable to. I wouldn't say that comes from a sociological sense of peer pressure, but that comes from myself. At the same time, it's been a steep learning curve in realizing that recognizing your flaws and where you can build upon them is part of having a great career, and it's part of being a good colleague and a good leader. And although I command a small team, in reaching out to my team members and helping them acknowledge where they need to improve and also recognizing where I need to improve, you can all grow continuously. And that's something that's at my level, which is quite junior, but then at a very senior level, there's no way Sandberg or Rometty can lead the teams that they do, globally recognized international companies, without realizing that perfection is maybe an illusion, or at least something that we shouldn't put so much pressure on in obtaining.
I think it's definitely an illusion. I mean, that's like you said it that way. Maybe it's an illusion, and like in my experience, it's absolutely an illusion. And
probably because I'm still struggling with it.
Say that again?
Probably because I'm still struggling with that idea.
Okay. Mary, what do you think of this?
Perfection is an illusion. I had to learn that the hard way, but it totally is an illusion. Because you can work on something for the next 25 years and it still not be perfect. Because you'll find something new every time, right? Every time someone looks at it. I think working with creatives, there came a point that we'd have to say, okay, you got to let it go. Like, it's good enough. We're going to go get some results now and we can improve it. Like, and that whole, we can improve, lets you
improve.
Yeah, you can always improve. And you just like, this is when we're going to let it go. And now we're going to go improve it later.
But in defense of the belief that perfectionism is attainable or desirable, many times, first of all, we're raised, you can get an A on your paper, right? You can get 100% on your paper in school. So perfect is possible in school, right? I mean, certainly not in life, really, but in school it is. And there's also, I'm going to call it a truism that most people believe, and I'm not saying I don't believe it's not true, but I don't think it helps us here, which is, women have to work twice as hard to be recognized. Women have to work twice as hard to get ahead. And I believe there is some truth to that. However, it gets this idea in our head that if we don't produce twice the results, if we don't achieve perfection, that's the reason that people will say, see, she can't cut it. And so I think we all come into the workplace with this very high bar. If it's not perfection, it's pretty close to it. That not only do we feel we need to attain, but other people tell us we need to attain. Is that part of what is going on when you talk about this, Rosie?
I think, yeah, definitely. I think so. I think the preconceived image, let's take women as the main analysis of that. The preconceived image that you need to have it all, which I do think is an illusion in itself. And I think, there's a balancing act in that having. I think the image that girls are presented with in their early years and that feeds up into university is an issue in that it's set into them from childhood. So I can see this absolutely in my peers and my colleagues, and particularly in analysing the way I approach work problems to how I ask male peers how they would. When boys and girls are raised, boys are raised to be ambitious and try things and jump in and take risks. And girls, I wouldn't say I particularly had this directly as a child, but I do see it from the influences of school and of exterior bodies. Girls, you have to be cautious. You have to make sure you don't try and make a mistake. You have to try and improve, but at the same time, you can't ever celebrate your accolades or your achievements as it's perceived as a negative connotation. You have to be universally likable, which feeds directly into the aspect of being perfect. Boys don't necessarily deal with that. I think we are moving away from it now, particularly with the issue of gender equality, starting from how boys and girls are raised differently, literally whittling down to how girls' toys are more expensive and they have one aesthetic whilst boys aren't. I know. But it's definitely the beginning. Pardon?
Don't get me started on that.
I know. No, it's something it's fed in from an early age, and although it's not consciously done, I don't think you could ever go to a little boy and ask him whether he's ever aspired to be or been instructed to be perfect. It's likewise with a young man, but with the women, is definitely an unconscious awareness of that, and I think the divide between how the genders are raised as children feeds into that.
I would agree, and I think too that all this together, first of all, there's a lot of research to back up everything you said. And certainly anecdotally, I believe it's true. I've observed that it's true. And I think it all kind of conspires against us. I'm not a conspiracist, but I think it does. I think it does conspire against us, coming back to the imposter syndrome. Not only, there are a lot of circumstances where we can feel like a fraud, feel like an imposter. And to me, I think there's two interesting dimensions of that. One is, let's look at the imposter part and let's look at the fraud part, because I think they're a little different even. So if you feel like a fraud, that sort of means like somebody's telling you you're great and you're like, no, I'm really not. That's
you resisting.
Yeah, if I agree with you that I'm great, then I would be saying I'm great, and I can't do that, right? Because that would be bragging and taking those accolades, and that's not what good little girls do. We're supposed to be humble.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one challenge. The other challenge, and this relates to, I think, what you do at Silkarmour so well, which is when you feel like an imposter, it's not just fraudulent. That's like, this isn't really me, right? So like being a fraud can be something about you, but imposter means that you're just not yourself. And that speaks more to not being authentic to me.
I think that's a great point, actually. As fraudulent, feeling or being fraudulent is the projection of something that is false, that is essentially not who you are or not what you do. So if I marketed myself as, I don't know, a banker, and I just spouted a lot of financial terminology and walked the walk and talked the talk, I would be considered a fraud, because I'm in no way, shape or form a banker. At the same time, when I started out my career, even at a university level, I was conscious that I would feel like an imposter, because when you would meet people at events and talk to other editors and pitch to people, you wouldn't feel yourself. I wouldn't feel myself in saying I'm a journalist. It was something I knew I had to grow into. And I know I would grow into with experience. And I absolutely feel that I'm a journalist now, because I have a good 4 or 5 years worth of writing, editing, freelancing, and working with other publications under my belt. Feeling like an imposter is something that you can overcome by gaining more experience and directly putting yourself in situations in which you can learn more about the area that you're in, or at least the area in which you feel like you're an imposter in. Being a fraud is essentially banging up against a wall, but being an imposter is something you can overcome with practice, with experience, and learning more about your respective field and about what you do and how you do it.
Yeah, that's a great analogy, because when you're in university, it's almost easier. Like, everyone's looking at you going, well, you're 22 years old. How could you possibly be a journalist? So when you say you're a journalist, I know that you are becoming a journalist. But when you're 28 or 35, or, people don't know that. And you don't have that obvious thing there. And yet what you're talking about is the fundamental dynamic of human growth. We have to envision ourselves into what we're growing into to give ourselves guidance on how to get there, but also to help other people help us get there. And we don't need to see it as being an imposter, even though it doesn't feel like it fits yet, to your point.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of us we smush those things together. If I feel like an imposter and that I'm still growing into it, now I'm lying to the world, I'm a fraud. And that's where it goes. That's where it hurts us. As opposed to, go ahead.
I think the thing that also picks up on a good point on something that InPower does, in that part of developing and growing personally in your professional capacity and relaying your personal growth into your professional capacity, you are, by overcoming imposter syndrome, you are moving into a reality that you have created, but you don't feel connected with yet. You can create the reality of being a journalist by getting qualified, getting a degree, having a job, and writing every day and editing. But you may still feel like an imposter because of a lack of connection with that role. That's purely down to experience and how much time and emotion you've invested in that. You can move yourself into that reality and no longer feel like an imposter. It'll just you have to invest time. Yeah. Which is what work is.
Well, good point. and the other part of that too is, and you mentioned this right at the beginning, I think, when you were talking about it, which is the best way to overcome all these things, is to be authentic and be truthful, but not to put yourself down. So if you're sort of like, well, okay, I'm early in my journalism career, or like I made this transition in my 40s to executive coaching, like at first I was coaching people, but I didn't really feel like an executive coach because I hadn't coached a president, Yeah. and by the time I did, it was like, okay, now I get it. So I don't think that issue ever goes away, but I do think that when you're just honest with people and you both own what you do well and own that you're still growing, that's when you begin to get over it, because you really don't feel like you're hiding anything. You're being upfront, but you're being upfront in a way that's not putting yourself down. It's not negative. It's just saying, I'm still working the kinks out. I'm loving doing it. And,
exactly.
Let's go. And that's when you don't feel so imposterish.
I think something that is something absolutely that maybe the younger generations need as part of the education that university or your first job, not necessarily higher education, that your first job gives you, is the psychological relationship you have with taking on a new role. I think that's left out, and considering that women mainly suffer from it, there needs to be some either, I wouldn't say universal literature, but at least time and money invested as part of a job transition and recognizing how you need to move into the reality of a new role. So even in terms of changing a career later on in your life, if you've worked as a lawyer and then you want to go and be a consultant, or you've worked as a banker and you want to go and be an artist, you may not feel like it because you haven't done it for that long, but you actively do it. And so that should be verification enough. But, the head needs to catch up with the heart sometimes, or vice versa.
You're very young, but you're very wise. Let me just say that. By the time I get to
the luxury of writing about this, so I cheat and then I get to research it.
Well, I just know that by the time that you're in your 40s, it's going to be like, you're going to be just sailing through this stuff, I can tell.
Well, hopefully these issues won't exist when I'm 40, so they'll be really...
They will.
Optimistic thinking.
Let's check back then. I'm very curious. So let's talk for a minute about clothing. And I do want to come back to the issue of gender at the end, because I know that men struggle with this a bit too. But I had an experience recently to do with clothing and to do with this imposter syndrome, which really surprised me. I have this jacket in my closet. I've had it for a while. I love it, but when I wear it, I don't feel good. I feel like I'm trying to be something I'm not. And I keep trying to, wear my hair differently, or wear a different shirt with it, or different pants or something. And I finally just realized, no, this thing is just, it's not me. It doesn't bring out the best of me. And so I'm going to get rid of it, which I'm kind of sad about, because the tailoring, everything about it I really like. And I just realized it was kind of putting me in that imposter syndrome place. Does that happen?
I think so. I think that has a huge, I think there's a huge connection, because I'm a big believer in the psychological relationship between identity and fashion, and how certain items of clothing, certain patterns can make you feel like it was essentially an ode to black in celebrating, you know, fashion's favorite color, and how everybody loved either the anonymity or the striking nature of wearing all black. But absolutely, I think there are pieces which people can wear that either make them feel like how they should look for their role, but they don't actually associate with that. And vice versa, some people don't dress for the role, but they adapt it and make it their own. And if they feel better and they feel more like themselves and more true to their nature and their job, then that makes a huge difference in their performance. And as long as you can really argue with that.
So
and
Rosie,
I have that in a way.
yeah,
Hello?
you're sort of coming in and out. Mary, are you getting that same?
Yeah, it's right now. It's only on audio signal.
Yeah, you're not coming through very clearly, which is too bad, because I really want to hear everything you just said.
Yeah.
Why don't you do that? And while you're calling back in, Mary, why don't you and I talk about this issue as it relates to men?
Okay.
Because I have coached men, and I know men who do express the same, you know, feeling like a fraud sometimes. And it's particularly associated, just like it is with women, with success. So, you know, you get that promotion, or you get that new opportunity to take on a big project, and you walk into the office, or you're driving to the office the first day, and the men will say, yeah, I'm sitting there going, what am I going to say to people? How am I going to get them to come along with me? You know, they have all of those same fears. But I think, as Rosie said earlier, they're socialized differently, and somehow they just don't let it stop them the way women do. Do either one of you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, there was stuff that you guys were talking about earlier, and I was thinking, like, imposter syndrome, I don't think ever really goes away. Because even if you're experienced, you're going to encounter new situations or different types of people. And then sometimes you're in a situation where you're like, what the heck do I do with this? Right?
Yes.
You know, like, it might be something weird's going on, like, and it's a twist to something you've had before. And I think sometimes with women, we're a little harder on ourselves versus true. Men who might say, okay, this will pass, right? Or let me give it a shot and let's see what happens. And they just kind of cover it a little bit. They're still feeling that way, but they just kind of cover it a little bit. And I think sometimes as women, we take it because of the perfectionist thing, because that's what I've been thinking about. Like, we get this perfectionist thing and we think, I'm in this role, I should know everything. It's the I know everything thing. And you're never going to know everything.
Yeah.
And it was getting me to remember back, because I don't think I was raised as a traditional girl. My dad, I had a lot of male influence when I was raised. And one incident that I think changed a lot of how I look. I think this is why I have my lemming view of the world, where I'll just go jump off the cliff. And if there's a pillow, that's great. If not, oh, well. I was doing the science fair project. Yeah, I was doing the science fair project. I was building a wind tunnel. And my dad was insistent, you got to do the electrical yourself. You got to learn. So figure it out, right? So yes, I almost electrocuted myself a couple times, right? But his view was, you got to do it. So my mom came running downstairs. This is the difference between men and women in their views. My mom's like, oh my God, she's going to kill herself. Da, 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 da. And my dad's like, she hasn't yet. I'm here. It's good. She's got to learn. She's got to try. And this is the way she's going to learn. So let her do it. And it was a whole different way of learning, interacting with my mom. It would have been all coddled and, oh, keep her safe. And my dad was like, jump. If you fall, then just get up again. He's like, and his view was, she might get electrocuted, but the current won't kill her.
Well, and you know, I think you're right, and you're making a distinction I think is important there. If we can say human beings experience the imposter syndrome when they're at this jumping point between what they feel is definitely their identity because they have done it and been it, and what is becoming their identity.
Yeah.
but the way that men and women react to it and are socialized to react to it may be very different. So the imposter syndrome may be a human phenomenon. The perfectionism disease may be a woman issue in terms of, how we react to the imposter syndrome. But now that Rosie's back, Rosie, I want you to comment on that, and then I want you to recap briefly what you said earlier about fashion, because I want to end on that note.
I think I definitely think the issue of perfection is a female relayed issue, in that, whether it's down to how we're raised and how that divides us between men and women particularly, but also I see that in boys and girls as children and as my age. I think I'm sort of relaying on what Mary said. I'm getting an idea actually of how the two are very different. As my mother raised me to be very jump off the cliff, try, go, be ambitious, and pick yourself up and try again. However, I know that was definitely not in her nature when she was my age. I know she was very much fearful and cautious because of the way she's been upbringing, the way she was brought up rather. But I think the way she's learned to raise her children, I have two sisters, all female household, all be strong-willed women who are willing to try anything, is she was a teacher of teenage boys for 35 years.
There you go.
And she was very good at it, and she was a real whip cracker. But I think that's how, she absolutely fed off that in the, 35 years she taught. She fed off that relentless energy and that, the bold ambition and the fearless quality that, men may have, whether that's instinctual, and that's something we can't necessarily change between genders, and that's okay. But absolutely having an awareness of how our weaknesses need to be patched up and how we can learn from the opposite sex in that regard, I think is really important. And how lucky that we are so aware of it now, more so than ever.
Yeah, definitely.
And relating to clothes, I have a huge psychological relationship with fashion, in the way that certain pieces make me feel the way I am and I feel are far truer to who I am. And that was definitely something I discovered aged 15, that I used to call it in Friends, the character Rachel Green, when she was working at Bloomingdale's and Ralph Lauren, it was all pencil skirts and shirts and blouses, so that the penny dropped, and I was like, I feel like myself when I dress like that. And so having, although some people discover that later on, I think having that relationship, and more importantly, understanding that relationship exists, that you can build your identity with physical things, which create a psychological connection, that if that creates a stronger sense of self when you're going into the world of work, that puts everybody at a much better advantage. But at the same time, in the way that toxic colleagues or bad friendships or bad experiences can bring you down, it's important to not hold on to shoes that aren't comfortable and that dresses that, show off your bad parts. If it's a pretty dress and it's in style and everyone says it looks good, but you don't like it, don't keep it.
Yeah.
It's a bringer of negative energy. And that's, at the end of the day, the only world that negative energy will affect is yours. And so you need to take responsibility in filtering those.
That is a truly brilliant statement. That is a truly brilliant
Thank you.
statement. I want to go back into the recording and pull that out, I think. Because
Please feel free.
You're absolutely right. That we're, and you said this in our first recording and conversation, is we get so used to hearing the world tell us what looks good, both on us and in fashion and all this kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, it's really about how it makes us feel that makes it good on us.
I think it's a universal aspect, particularly as women have far more invested in our appearance, whether that's through pressure or through your own personal preference. I mean, in the job that I'm in, I know it's best if I were to wear my head up tied in a bun or in a slick back ponytail, but frankly, I don't think it flatters me. And I go for the Mufasa hair look because it makes me feel far more like myself. And I have better days when I do. I know that I'm less happy and I perform less to my ability than if I'm not wearing a dress that I associate with work and my hair isn't down and cascading everywhere. I know that I am myself and that I don't feel fortunate and I don't feel like an imposter. I feel like the journalist that I am. And I feel in control of the content I'm creating if I look how I should. Yeah. And yet I don't hear you saying, and I know when we talked about this before, I think Mary experienced this too, is that it's how we feel. On the other hand, we do need people to tell us how we look
so that we get, because sometimes, you know, the way we look at ourselves is a little warped for better and worse.
The mind's eye.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's where a big part of my role in Silkarmour, helping women identify their working wardrobe and the reliability of a capsule wardrobe, can come in and be really useful in that regard. There's a balance to be stricken when in identifying what you think and you know makes you feel comfortable versus what is actually appropriate for the workplace. And everybody can find that balance. But it's like in working on imposter syndrome, you just need help and you need you need a team in order to do that. That's another thing women need to know in terms of being perfection. No one can do it alone. Everybody needs to hold hands, because men don't do it alone. You know, no male CEO gets to the point, or no male director gets to the point that he does without a massive team helping him. For some reason, we think that we need to make up for it in doing it by ourselves and catching up with everybody, but that's not the case.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Even dressing, men will go and have a personal shopper go to get their suits made with a tailor, someone to help them buy their shoes. They have help everywhere.
It's the joke. I don't know about this. For some reason, women need to know about it because it's fashion. And that's a poor assumption we have as well. But some do know about it.
That's right. Well, and the problem is there's so many fashions that even if you know this, you might not know that.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness, yes.
And just one last thing that struck me when we're talking about the capsule wardrobe, you know, that smaller wardrobe that goes together and it all looks great on you and it all makes you feel wonderful. It is amazing, you know. I think that, again, the fashion industry wants us to just go buy the next shiny thing that's supposed to be cool. And so we end up with this closet full of stuff that we feel like we should be able to, you know, oh, we have so much here we should wear. But in reality, it's, in my experience, it's only a few things that really look good on you, make you look good, and go with everything and are appropriate to, you know, your lifestyle. It usually isn't an entire closet full of things, which is why we end up wearing, you know, the small percentage of everything we own. And when we get that reversed and just say, well, maybe success looks like fewer things that really make me feel great, and the rest of it can just go.
I think that's something we kind of learn, and maybe in particular women learn as we transition into more mature years and through our careers. You know, you don't need as much stuff. You don't need as much mass per se. You don't need a huge group of friends, and you don't need to have a gazillion hobbies. You need to have tons of clothes. You need, you know, three friends you can rely on. You only need to do 2 different hobbies that really make you fulfilling. You need 1 job, or maybe 2, depending on who you are and your lifestyle, that's fulfilling. There's a definite clash in the message that fashion and the cultures and the subcultures surrounding it, saying that we need a lot of things to be happy and to be successful. And I think part of growing up and knowing who you are and overcoming any cases of imposter syndrome is filtering through all of that and really identifying with what is genuine to me. Mm-hmm. What do I identify with?
And allowing
you always need a lot of shoes.
That
never goes away.
That is the one exception to the rule. What's life without shoes?
That's right. They expand to fill your closet, whatever your closet size is, and maybe more.
Absolutely.
Well, we are out of time here. This has been a wonderful conversation about the imposter syndrome and the role of clothes, the difference between genders, how it relates to the perfectionism disease. Rosie, I want to thank you very much for being here and sharing your blog post with us and your wisdom here today. I hope you'll be back in the future.
Absolutely.
And Mary, thank you as always for operating this for us and being part of the conversation. You can always catch up with former conversations, previous conversations, and see what's coming at coffeebreak.InPowerCoaching.com. That's InPowerCoaching.com. And we hope to see you on future Coffee Break talk shows. Take care, everybody.
Bye.